Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 14 of the Movement as Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Carr, with my amazing co-host, Brendan Rarick, coming to you from the West Coast in sunny California. How are you doing today, Brendan?
Well, I think we're both tired, but we're going to do it anyways.
Tired's a mindset, Brendan.
Well, then my mindset is tired.
Yeah, mine as well, actually. I'm not going to lie. But it is a nice long weekend. You know, we're recording on a Monday.
Yep.
You know, happy Memorial Day. Shout out to all of those who gave their lives. We're in a day to remember our brave veterans who lost their lives in the line of duty. So remember that while you're enjoying your day off. And
that's right.
And you're barbecuing and enjoying your day today. Exactly. They would say freedom isn't free. Somebody paid for it. So
that's right.
Happy Memorial Day to you out in California.
Oh, happy Memorial Day to you and anybody who's listening who is a veteran, or and then obviously anyone who gave their lives, we've got to thank. So here we are, episode 14.
I know. And so kind of going through in preparation, I know we get a lot of questions either in the Strength Coach Forum or on the CFSC members page or on YouTube or on Instagram that get sent to us. And we kind of just want to sift through some of those. But in saying that right now, if you're listening, please, if you have questions that you want us to answer on the podcast, please feel free to either send them to us on social media, to the Movement as Medicine Instagram, to my Instagram, to Brendan's Instagram, or whatever means you want to reach us. I know our contact information is out there. We're always looking for questions. We get a pretty steady stream of them, but please, if there's something you want us to cover, a topic you want us to discuss, don't hesitate to submit, because we'll try to get that in the rotation for an upcoming episode for sure. And so it's one of the ones, couple of good ones we had this week. One, I think we're going to start off with was specifically training older populations and working in power exercise. So the question said, many of my clients are 50 or 60 or over, and what are the best power exercises for them? Can you please break them into upper and lower? And many of them have restrictions. What exercises might you use for an older population to develop power? And it's a good question because, as you know, as people get older, they might have limitations due to previous injuries that might make it difficult to program many of the traditional power exercises that you might do with some of your younger, more athletic position athletes. So things like hang cleans or loaded jumps or bounding or hopping. Some of these exercises you might not be as willing to program for an older population. But on the other side of that, we know that as people get older, the thing that they lose quickest is their nervous system's ability to produce force rapidly. We tend to lose our ability to produce power twice as fast as our ability to actually just maintain our strength. And so it becomes a really important thing for us to make sure we're continuing to train the nervous system to contract rapidly. But we have to do so in a way that keeps them healthy. So I know, Brendan, that we've kind of talked about this a lot. And we talk with our coaches at CFSC about this a lot, but what are some exercises that you tend to find favorable for clients as they get older?
Well, as you get older and you work with older clients or the older population, power becomes all relative. So a true plyometric exercise has very, very short contact times. So these are the cool stuff you see on the gram or on YouTube where you're doing depth jumps into a box jump or hurdle jumps, or the ground contact times are very, very short and explosive. And when I say relative, basically anything faster than walking for somebody who is older is a challenge to the nervous system. So that means power in quotation drills look different. And the simplest one for lower body is a ladder. And so no, ladder doesn't make you faster if you're an athlete necessarily. But it does challenge the nervous system. It challenges your balance. It gets you moving faster than walking. It challenges you in different planes of motion. And it's really, really fun to do when you do it with a group of adults, or even when we do it in our group. Our CFSC groups is probably the most fun and most exciting thing that we do in our courses. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can challenge somebody in a ladder. There's so many different drills you can do. So ladder drill is probably the quickest, easiest, cheapest, simplest that you can just throw a ladder out and you're going to challenge that person's nervous system. It's also kind of like brain games. We've talked about Carla Hannaford's Smart Moves book. It's a challenge for your brain, especially if it's hasn't gotten jogged that morning and you're kind of foggy. The first thing that you're doing is ladder drills. It's a good challenge. So ladder drills is probably the simplest and quickest. Upper body is going to be, or do you want to add to ladders?
Well, what ladders kind of made me think about was another thing that like we traditionally look at as a warm-up for our athletes, right? Like you think about the ladder drill as like just a warm-up for like your younger athletes. Like we're not thinking about them producing power. We're going to use things like jumps, hops, and bounds. But skipping is another thing that I use a lot with some of my older adults for power generation that we might also look at as just a warm-up exercise for a more relatively young and powerful athlete. So for instance, with some of my older adults, I'll just say, hey, you're going to skip down and back across the room. Then you're going to come over here and throw a med ball. And because skipping is pretty low impact, it's not like you're jumping or hopping. You're kind of moving from one leg to the other, the same way that bounds are a little less impactful than hopping is. And so it gets them to get hip extension, lower leg extension, and to push powerfully and move fast without as much deceleration that's required. So again, like you said it really well, that power is relative. So if you just take warm-up drills often and scale them, they might be good options for people who might not be as tolerant to the impact that might come with more aggressive jumping, hopping, and bounding type of drills.
Right. So what's a warm-up drill for one person might be power drills for another person. Two other things I like to do, if they can jump rope or skip rope, I like to use a jump rope. The jump rope does all the coaching for you. So when they miss the jump or the rope hits them in the shins, the rope did all the coaching. I didn't have to tell you that you did it wrong. If they can't skip rope, and we're not necessarily going to spend all of our time learning how, we can just grab our imaginary jump rope, where you just kind of learn to bounce and catch yourself in place, kind of like pogo hops. Like pogo hops, right? So they call the ankling drills pogo drills. So you could do pogo hops in place. The cool thing about pogo hops is you could also do them laterally, side to side. So I call it slalom, like you're slaloming down a hill and hitting the moguls. You can go forward and back, and you can just go in place as well. So that's a nice, easy way to get your imaginary jump rope out and get a little bit of bounce. So Dan John calls it bounce, which I really, really like. Is just this idea of being bouncy like a basketball. The other drill that I really like for older population, well, if they can box jump, great. A lot of them might be fearful of doing so, or I have the fear of them falling and getting hurt. So I do a lot of squat drops. And a squat drop is essentially you get up to your tippy toes and you fall into a squat where you learn to catch yourself, almost like if I was to throw you a water balloon or an egg that you didn't want to break. You would accept the water balloon or the egg with your arms. So I want you to learn how to accept the ground with your legs. And I always tell people that your muscles are the shock absorbers, and your joints are like the frame or the axles of a car, right? So you don't want to absorb the force with the frame or the axles. You want to absorb the force with the springs, and those are your muscles. So when I come up to my tippy toes and I drop down into a squat and I learn to absorb that force, I'm effectively training my nervous system, but in a very low risk, medium reward type way.
Yeah. And some things I thought about when you were talking about the pogo drills, actually, this old man has actually been doing a lot of jump roping. But it's because, like, my Achilles, I've had this kind of nagging Achilles stuff, and it's been actually very helpful for me doing the pogoing in the jump roping, just to kind of recondition the Achilles tissue, the foot tissue to be more springy. I feel like maybe as you get older, we know that your tissue changes. It's going to be less elastic, and more, whether if you had an injury, there could be scar tissue, but less responsive to stretch unless we continue to stress it in a way that demands elasticity. And so an interesting thought when it comes to older adults is a really interesting study, actually. I think it was a Robert Schlepp fascia study. And what they did is they had a group of like older women. So I think they were all in their 60s, and they were relatively untrained. And what they did is they looked at a muscle biopsy of like their calf. And what they saw was pretty typical tissue for an untrained 60-something-year-old woman. It was kind of unorganized tissue. It wasn't very responsive to stretch when they compared it under a microscope to like a tangled fishing line, right? That's kind of what they said. I'll find the study and put it in the show notes. And then what they did is they just had them do almost like step aerobics, where they would go up on like a 6-inch step and then powerfully push through their calf. So they would step and then like plantar flex. Right? So they weren't even really leaving the ground, but they were doing this, training program over the course of, I don't remember how many weeks it was. And they went back and they did muscle biopsies again. And what they saw was the actual fascial tissue structure change. So obviously, from a power generation standpoint, you get the changes in the nervous system, your ability to produce force, right? But then also from a tissue health standpoint, your fascia is going to respond in a way that absorbs force better. And so if you think about, one, like as people get older, they're more liable to have soft tissue injuries. One, because their tissue kind of starts to break down, but also part of it is just because of disuse. The tissue is going to respond to whatever you do regularly. And so for me, thinking about that, the things like the jump roping and the ankling or pogoing has been really helpful to kind of get my lower legs healthier. And for your younger athletes for preventative, I think it's actually a really viable thing to just keep in a program, whether it's a warm up or as a power drill, maybe for someone who's a little bit older. And so just having them work on hopping or jump roping, like you said, can go a really, really long way to kind of just, some of those nagging, whether calf strain, Achilles strain, plantar fascia strain, that stuff, by continually introducing them to that, those stressors can be really valuable. And then also from there, when you talk about the older adults doing things like jump roping or ankling, is we know the biggest risk for death as people get over 60 is an accidental fall. And the reason that is, a large portion of it anyways, is that they find the people who fall more frequently as they get older or have more stumbles in their walk are usually people who have less lower leg extensor power. So when they walk, they don't push through their forefoot. They tend to shuffle. You ever see how like an older person walks? They kind of get that kind of shuffling gait as they get older because they're not pushing off as hard. And that is going to make them more likely to trip and catch the front side of their foot. Whereas they found these people who had less incidences of falls or had a more powerful gait, even as they were in their 70s and 80s, they were stronger through their lower leg. And so think about big picture, not power for performance, but power for fall prevention. I know that's something our friend Pat Van Galen talks about a lot. As far as fall prevention goes, something you really start to need to think about with your clients as they start to head north of 60, because it becomes a little more consequential every time they stumble as they get older.
Yeah. And I would say probably the most advanced lower body power drills that we do would be kettlebell swing. And we consider kettlebell swing an explosive lower body drill, even though you're not really catching yourself or you don't actually get any amplitude or leave the ground or anything, because it's the same muscles. So you're accelerating the bell with your hip extensors. And essentially, a kettlebell swing is a broad jump in place without the pounding on the joints.
I've never heard somebody say it like that, but that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, and that's actually, I took that. I heard Dan John say that one time.
Well,
so
you stole it, of course.
I did. I stole it. But it was genius. Like, yeah, it's just broad jump. It's the same muscles, the same movement, just without the actual leaving of the ground part of it. So that's probably the most advanced. We don't really do hang cleans or Olympic lifts with any of our adults just due to the lack of mobility and the higher risk of injury with those drills. So Olympic lifting, snatches, hang cleans, we don't really do any of that. We don't do a lot of the advanced. I mean, we all have our exceptions to the rule where we do some hurdles, but for the most part, we don't do any hopping. So that's same leg to same leg, just due to the risk of injury. We do bound and jump, but we do most of our bounds and jumps. So bound is left to right, right to left. Jump is 2 legs to 2 legs. But we don't really have that much of a horizontal component. So the most horizontal component we probably have is with ladders and skipping down and back. Most of our stuff is in the vertical plane, which it's very linear and there's just less risk involved. But when you start adding the horizontal component, you do add a little bit of progression or difficulty. So that's another nice way you could add a little bit of difficulty, right? So like I was saying with the pogos, if you start adding front to back and side to side, now we've got frontal plane and we've got a little bit of horizontal component. So we've increased the difficulty, but we don't do a lot of hopping or excessive horizontal type plyometrics or power drills with our adult populations or any Olympic lifting. The most aggressive weighted drill we do is kettlebell swing. If they have a good deadlift and they can touch their toes and they've kind of earned it.
And so I would say with the hopping, what we will do mostly is just lay out the agility ladders and have them just hop over the rungs of the ladder. Because in truth, I don't really care how high they jump. They could jump as high as they want over the ladder. They could jump 3 feet off the ground. The implement doesn't need to be there. Often the implement is the intimidation, and that is usually if there is going to be a fall or a rolled ankle, that's where the issue is they're so worried about getting over the barrier. And so for the adults, I'll just lay out a bunch of those ladders. And if we are going to hop, that's a nice, safe, easy way to do it without them. Because unanimously, the adults, even the older ones, are like kids. If you put out a bunch of hurdles, they're going to try to jump the biggest one. It does not matter. I have a guy in my adult group. I won't say his name. He like if the biggest box is out, or the biggest hurdle is out, like he has to go and try to do it. And he's like 70 something years old, and I'm like, he always has an injury. He's just an old
child. He's just an old child.
We don't grow up. We just get older, right? And
that's right.
I love the enthusiasm, but he's always complaining to me about like he plays hockey still at 70 something. He's like, my back hurts, my hip hurts, my ankle hurts, and I look over and he's like, I'm like, please, like just stick to the ladder. Like you don't need to jump the 18-inch hurdle. But he's gonna try. So. I usually, if you just put those out, then it kind of keeps them constrained and they can still generate power and still work on deceleration without potential risk for injury. Because once you see someone sprain an ankle who, is a desk worker or someone, and then their ankles looks like a grapefruit, you're like, maybe I didn't need you to jump over that today. So,
yeah. One of my favorite things to say. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, keep going.
I was going to say, one of my favorite things to say to people is I don't care about how high you can jump. I care about how well you can land. So let's focus on the landing first. Then I care about how high you can jump. So if you don't land well, then how high you jump doesn't really matter to me. So let's work on your landings, your ability to absorb force and catch yourself. Then we'll worry about the height. And that question or that comment that I use a lot with my clients came from Coach Dose, who I believe it was during, I can't remember if it was during one of his Perform Better talks or one of his products. He said, how fast would you drive a Ferrari if it didn't have any brakes? And you're like, well, I would drive my Ferrari very fast because that would end in catastrophe. So you got to build the brakes first. So let's build our braking system, which is strength training and your ability to catch yourself. And then let's build the engine or the horsepower and add that on top. Because you could have the fastest car in the world, but if you can't stop, it's just going to sit in the driveway.
Exactly.
Or else you're only going to drive it once. So that's one of my favorite things to say to people is I'm more worried about how well you can land than I am about how high you can jump to start.
I like that
and
a lot.
then I'm worried about how high you can jump after you can land well.
It just made me think about, like, I don't know if anyone has gotten into F1 like I have from watching Drive to Survive.
Oh my God.
So what's amazing about
series?
those cars? Yeah, I mean, so it made me think about this. What's amazing about those cars is not that they go 200 miles an hour. That's pretty cool. But the fact that when they slow into a corner, they'll slow down to like 30 miles an hour in an instant and then accelerate again. Like, you couldn't race around those tracks if you can't brake into the corners like the way they do. That's the most amazing thing, because they show the speedometer, right? And the RPMs, and they'll show like these guys would be ripping down coming into a corner at like nearly 200 miles an hour, and then they put the brakes on. The brakes don't lock up, right? And then they're able to just drop it way down like 50 miles an hour, get around the corner, and then take off again.
So it's actually not who can go the fastest. It's who has the most control going around the turns and can stay at the highest speed without losing that control.
Exactly. It's unbelievable, honestly.
It's incredible. The F1 series on Netflix is amazing.
Drive to Survive. And if you watch it, if you're watching a show on Netflix, it must be because
this is true.
Not much of a TV.
Yes, that's one series I have completed all episodes of both seasons.
Yeah, it's very good. We were on lower body power talking about upper body. One thing we always tell everybody is that whenever we talk about people opening facilities, is we say, like, invest in getting a medicine ball wall. Because everybody can throw a med ball for the most part. Like a beginner client, child, a professional athlete, an older person, an injured person, most of the time, unless like both their arms are injured, you can probably throw a med ball. And there's really not many other ways to train upper body power that is going to be especially non-impactful on the joints than just throwing a med ball. And so, it's good. I don't know if this is going to be a short answer, but we do a variety of medicine ball throws for adults, whether it be chest passes or side tosses or overhead throws or shot put throws or slams. You don't even need a medicine ball wall for slams. But I would find a way to throw medicine balls, especially if you're training adults.
Yeah, and we also, I tell people that medicine balls are just jumping for your upper body. They're like, why do we do medicine balls? I was like, well, you jump for your legs, you throw medicine balls because it's jumping for your upper body. We catch all the medicine balls too. So because just like I was explaining, you need to learn how to catch and absorb your body weight, you need to learn how to catch and absorb the ball. So it's not just the release. We also catch all of our medicine balls. There's a few drills where we let it bounce once, but a lot of our drills we throw and catch, because on the catch is when you learn to absorb the force and then you transfer the energy back into the wall or the ground or whatever throw you're throwing. So we do catch a lot of those drills. Again, its power is all relative. So if somebody's just, they're throwing as hard as they can and it's not not like what your baseball pitchers throw, it's still power for most people who don't do anything but walk and sit and watch TV and sit on their computer all day. So throwing a medicine ball with even just a little bit of power is power exercise for somebody who doesn't do a lot of that stuff. And And I don't think I've ever seen an injury from maybe a couple fingers trying to catch the ball off the wall, but it's generally very, 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 very safe. And we've watched probably tens of thousands of medicine ball throws and only had a couple jam fingers. So it's very safe. Even if you do it incorrectly, you're not going to have any catastrophic injuries. Whereas jumping, you can definitely have some problems if you again, like you talked about, jumping on a box that they're not able to do, or they're hopping, right? That could lead to a fall or an ACL tear. But medicine balls are very, very safe for the most part. And we do throw only the soft medicine balls. We do not throw any of the rebound or rubber medicine balls that come back really, really fast. So yeah, I always recommend sand medicine balls where they kind of hit the wall and die, or the soft ones, like the triple stitched medicine balls are probably the best because they get the little bit of a bounce and you have to catch them. So you get that absorption off the wall.
Yeah. The Perform Better, they're called like Perform Better Extreme Soft Toss or non-rebounding balls. They're we have these 14-inch diameter ones that are big, and then we also have like the 12-inch or 10-inch rather diameter ones, which if you're going to be training kids or just people who are smaller in general, the 10-inch ones work really well because even if their weight isn't any different, sometimes it's just hard to throw a big one. But that's what I would recommend because they don't bounce enough that you're going to catch one off the nose or off the finger. And they're softer, so like if you're throwing against like we have a cement wall, but not everyone's going to throw off a cement wall. They're going to be a little quieter as well. So definitely invest in those, and find ones that get them light enough so they can actually throw them fast. 6 pounds or 8 pounds, even 4 pounds for some people, because I'd rather see them throw them quickly. And what's actually really interesting too, when you have people start to throw medicine balls, you can actually start to see their nervous system develop like some athleticism, right? Like I would say, if you want me to assess someone, how good of an athlete they are, just like have them go through some medicine ball side tosses, and you're going to figure out pretty quickly how coordinated they are. Like if they can coordinate hip rotation, shoulder rotation, and the pulsing of their nervous system to be able to produce force and relax. When you have people do that for a few weeks, all of a sudden you start to see them kind of like figure it out. They get their kind of rhythm down. So it's just a good overall tool. Like you said, very low risk. And generally, those medicine balls will last you a long time. Like we probably put those Perform Better medicine balls to the test with the amount of volume we do at MBSC. But even ours last for a really long time. So if you're just like a small gym or, you're an independent trainer, those medicine balls are a good investment because they will last you for a long time. Because we do thousands of throws a day with ours, and they last, pretty long time there. So definitely invest in a medicine ball wall, or even if you're going to do partner throws. Even at MBSC, before we were in the new place, we didn't have like a big wall to throw against sometimes. So we'd have to do partner throws. So we'd line the athletes up on other sides of the gym. We do kneeling chest pass, kneeling overhead throw, kneeling side toss. And like, it's not the same as catching off a wall. Like you mentioned, you don't have to catch the rebound. But at the end of the day, you got to work with what you have. And so moving things fast is the bottom line. So find a way to get them to do that, or just do things, slams, chest passes off the floor, slams off the floor, one arm chest passes off the floor. You can find a way to do it, even if you might not have a wall to throw against. If you're in a gym with drywall or you have neighbors who complain, I know that's often a problem for people in gyms, but see if you can find a way to get it done.
And the drills that we don't do really for upper body power are, we don't do any plyo push-ups just due to the wrists and the elbows aren't great absorption joints, especially with your full body weight. So when you catch a 4 to 6, 8, 10 pound medicine ball, that's all you're absorbing. Whereas if I'm 200 pounds and I launch myself off the ground, I'm catching 200 pounds on my wrists and elbows, which are smaller hinge joints that don't like crazy weight like that.
Most people don't really have great wrist extension. Like, look at my wrist. And
Yeah.
so, like, if I repeatedly drop my body weight onto it, for a lot of people, they're going to come in the next day and be like, oh, like my forearms hurt, my hands hurt. And so it's just probably not a great idea for most people. That's why generally burpees, like, I'm like, I don't want people jumping onto their stomach repeatedly.
Yep.
So, but medicine balls are a really great tool that are much more joint friendly.
Yes. There are power drills you can do with the Kaiser or bands. Man, they're okay. They work pretty well. They can be hard to get in the correct position. And the Kaiser is great, but not everybody has it. Most people don't have a Kaiser. So, but if you do have it, you can come up with some pretty creative upper body and some lower body and rotational drills for power involving Kaiser and bands. But really, it's the medicine ball and being able to absorb your body weight in different positions that are going to be the true power drills. And remember, it's all scalable based off of the individual. So what's a warm up for somebody might be a max effort power drill for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that's going to bring us to our next question, which I think is actually a good kind of segue from talking about, training the general population and maybe the older population. And the question was, should I be programming stretching for my clients every time they come in? And if so, when should they do it? Should they do it before they train? Should they do it after they train? And so it's kind of good to dive into the overall conversation about should we program stretching, because this is one of those things, again, that you'll get vastly wide opinions on the internet, and you'll have everyone citing research to support them no matter what side that they're on. And so that's why it's important to kind of take it back to the actual practical application, and understand, what are we getting out of stretching? What is the goal? And then how should we think about applying it? And so I think the place to start here would be to ask, what are we as the coach hoping to provide the client by having them stretch, and then go from there.
Well, the first thing is, I know stretching feels good. And everybody who stretches says, I feel so much better. Oh, that's my mom.
Hi.
What you can leave the dog.
Hi.
It's fine. All right. Well, now we've got Sunny here. Okay. All right. Down, Sunny. So when I stretch, or when anyone else is stretched, when they stretch, the comments are all the same. I feel so much better after I stretch. As the coach, what I want is that people can get into better positions after they stretch. And if you haven't done anything all day long, stretching is a very, very nice way to get into your body after having not done anything. So instead of me just, oh, hey, let's just start with some kettlebell swings, which is very, very advanced and going to load up those muscles very, very quickly, almost like you would load up a bow and arrow. I want to stretch the bow and arrow out a little bit before I start pulling it all the way back. So I look at it as, one, everybody says it feels good, and I know it feels good, and whether the research says it feels good or not, it's a nice, gentle, easy way to get you to explore movement and your end ranges if you haven't been doing anything all day long. Like first thing in the morning, you're pretty stiff from not moving all night. Like the first thing you want to do is kind of stretch and get things moving a little bit. So, and then if I can get you in a better position by doing a little bit of stretching, we'll use the deadlift as an example. So we stretch your hips and stretch your hamstrings, and now I can sit that femur back better into the socket, and now I can sit into my hinge more, means I'm going to activate, I'm going to get in a better position to deadlift, and then I'm going to activate the correct muscles or more of the muscles that I want to activate, because now I can get in a better position. So that's what I'm thinking about as the coach, at least what I'm thinking about.
And I think what helps to understand is when you say, I feel better, when that client says, hey, after we stretch, I feel better, what they're really saying from a physiological standpoint is they have more stretch tolerance. Physiologically, their nervous system is allowing them to get into a better position. So when you stay in a sustained stretch, right, it affects the stretch reflex of the muscles. So our body is going to eventually, if you keep that stimulus, allow more elongation of the muscle as far as like the elasticity goes. We're not changing the length of a muscle. The muscles are always the same length, but neurologically, we're allowing more stretch. And the sensation of that stiffness, like you said, that client who sits at a desk all day and then sits in their car to drive to the gym and then comes in, they can work through that stiffness in a low stress, low risk environment on the floor stretching, which two things. One is going to help them to get into a better position actively. I'm not fooling anyone by saying that, like, listen, they're not going to turn into Gumby. We're not making these big, like physical changes in a matter of a minute.
You're not going to do
it's all changes in the nervous system. Yeah. And it's all a change in the nervous system. We're not, completely changing the muscle fascicle, but you're allowing them to get into better positions. And then when they start to get up and move actively, one, they're going to have better stretch tolerance. Two, psychologically, they feel better. And that's huge. If you can provide them something for 5 minutes when they come in that makes them feel better, then their willingness to go do things that are harder afterwards that might have been more uncomfortable otherwise, is improved, right? And I always love the old Gray Cook of like, you might have them do those stretching or motor control drills to kind of teach them or help them get in positions better, but then you hit the save button by having them load in those positions, right? And so if it's like I'm doing a posterior capsule stretch or a 90-90 external rotation hip stretch when they come in, that's great. And then when I go and load up that goblet squat or split squat out there and they have a big dumbbell at their chest, that's what's going to help them change the tissue quality, the actual tissue quality long term, and maintain those ranges of motion over time. And so the stretching provides an opportunity. It's that, again, same thing I say about foam rolling, that neurological window of opportunity for them to move a little bit better. It gets some of that lingering stiffness out. And then also, more importantly, if you're someone who coaches someone, 2 or 3 days a week, you're just ensuring that they're doing it. In the perfect world, they could do that at home, and then you could come in and we could just warm up. But anyone who coaches people just knows that most people aren't going to do that. So if we ensure that they get stretching for a few minutes 3 times a week, by putting it as part of the program, it just gives them a more all-encompassing workout, as opposed to just saying, hey, go grab an empty bar and start squatting. That's your warm-up, right? That might work for someone who is doing all the other things, but for the majority of your clients, we're going to kind of just make it part of the process for them right when they come in the door.
So let's dive into the theory or the myth. I don't know if it's so much a myth, but the stretching makes me less powerful or makes me weaker. So the study that they did, or they cite, was a study where they did a vertical jump, and then they had that individual or individuals stretch their hip flexors. I believe it was for 8 minutes on each side. Or hamstrings. I can't remember if it's hamstrings or hip flexors, but they stretched their hips for 8 minutes on each side and then jumped again. Common sense would tell you, you're not going to jump as high. So if you hold stretches for 15 minutes and then jump again, you should jump less. Like, that makes sense. You did nothing to prime their nervous system. Like you said, you've increased stretch tolerance, but you didn't warm up. You didn't wake up the nervous system. You didn't prime anything. So, and we would never do, a foam roll and stretch for 15, 20 minutes and then go right into our power drills. We always have a bridge, which we would call motor control or the warm up. So we're going to do like our little low amplitude skips and jump rope, and we're going to do moving or active mobility drills. Like we're going to use all that window of opportunity that you spoke about. We're going to use that in low risk, low amplitude type ways, and then go to our power exercises. So yeah, if you were to do vertical jump and then lay on your back and do 20 minutes of deep breathing to relax and then jump again, like I don't think you wouldn't jump as high. So yeah, the study that they cite is not exactly the best study and is not in a representation of how anybody would actually train, or common sense would tell us how to train. It's
a great example of research being statistically relevant, but practically irrelevant, right? You have to look at what the research says. Yes, I would tell you 10 times out of 10, if you stretch a muscle and then immediately after say, I want to produce power through the same muscle, it's not going to work out the way you want. But like you said, the benefit of a really good active warm-up where you're skipping and raising body temperature and actually increasing central nervous system drive after you do some static stretching to make these people feel better is a really good way to get the best of both worlds.
Right, and that active stretching allows you to get into a better position, which allows you to then have a better warm-up and more activation, which theoretically would then help you jump higher later.
Exactly.
If you did it in those steps.
And so people always ask, like, well, should I then have people stretch after they work out? Because I don't want them to stretch before. One, realize the research on the power, yes, it reduces power, but not if you build a program correctly. Two, I don't mind if people stretch after, but I put it before because it makes them feel better for the workout ahead. If they want to stretch after and cool down, that's great too. There's probably some benefit to them getting their nervous system to relax and them just doing more stretching if it makes them feel good. Or if they do it at the time when they come home. But from a programming standpoint, we always put it at the very beginning because generally that's what they like and they feel good heading into the workout. So, and for us, again, it's not a long, like 20-minute stretch. We stretch for like 5 minutes and we get whatever the big rocks are. So whether it's, hip rotators, hip flexors, ankles, shoulders, and then it's like, all right, let's go. Let's start moving. But think about, the population in front of you, what do they probably need? If it's a hockey group, they probably need more hip-centric work. If it's a baseball group, maybe it's T-spine and some shoulder stuff. It's a, adult population. Think about the joint-by-joint approach. Where are most people stiff? And just kind of keep those things in rotation.
Shoulders.
Exactly.
You'll make most of your money as a trainer, ankles, hips, and shoulders.
Exactly.
The big three.
And then make sure that they're strength training in those ranges of motion, and they're going to start to get a lot better. It's really unbelievable when you see that combination. You have some people who are real stiff when they come in to see you, and you just consistently stretch them at the beginning and consistently load them in the weight room progressively, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, like you can touch your toes, you can squat down with your heels on the ground, you can get your arms over your head. And it didn't take, an hour of stretching every day. It just took some consistent input over time.
Right. Strength training through full ranges of motion is generally pretty good flexibility and mobility training. And to this point, even if that power thing was to be true, that stretching did affect power. Another thing we know about stretching is it reduces the likeliness of injury, right? Because and when you are injured, when you go to physical therapy and you have something injured, what's generally the homework that they give you? Stretch something.
Yeah.
Stretch it. Whatever it is, like either the backside or you need to stretch more is generally the answer. So why wouldn't we stay a step ahead and preventatively stretch to reduce the likeliness of injury? So I can't remember who Mike used. I think it was LeBron James. I'll use Michael Jordan. So if you had Michael Jordan and you told him to stretch every day, even though it was going to decrease his power a little tiny bit, And instead of playing 55 games, because he was injured for 15 of them, he played the whole season. Like, I would take him playing the whole season and a little bit of a reduction in power because we stretched. And that's just, it's a theoretical, like, who knows if that would actually happen. Yeah. It's a good thought exercise. So, like, give or take, like, okay, so you decrease a little bit of power, but you're less likely to get injured, so he can play more games, right? So, like, obviously that's Michael Jordan, right? We want Michael Jordan playing every single game. And he has a little bit of power to give away. But it's a thought experiment. So ask yourself, like, okay, do I stretch to reduce injuries amongst the entire team, or do I give up a little bit of and give up a little bit of power, or do I avoid stretching completely and put people at risk to save a little bit of power? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. My answer is going to be, I want my healthiest people playing, and if I have to give up a tiny little bit of power for that, I will. So yeah, it's just an interesting thought experiment. If that power thing was to be true.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just like a complete program should have all of those elements in it. You should, stretch at the beginning. You should go through your warm-up. You should, like, all of these things. We always say it's a recipe, not a menu. And so ultimately, if you're skipping steps on any part of the program, I think that you're probably leaving something to be desired for the people that you work with. So those were good questions we got sent in. Again, if you're listening to this, please, if there's any topics you'd like us to cover, send them in. We'll put it on the docket. We always like to get listener questions. And I guess it's book recommendation time now, Brendan.
Mm-hmm,
you have one handy?
So I do. Well, the football coach of our team sent me a Bill Walsh book. Now, I tried to buy this book online. It's called Finding the Winning Edge by Bill Walsh and Brian Billick, actually, the Ravens' old head coach, he was an assistant coach for Bill Walsh and wrote the book with him. Now, if you go on Amazon, the book is $600 because there's only like two people selling. Yeah, there's only like two people selling the.
Does Bill Walsh come back from the dead and read it to you?
I wish.
Jesus.
Now, he's still alive.
Is he?
I think so. I don't know. And now I got to look that up. But Zach, the head coach, gave me his version. So that I'm reading it right now. It's one of the top 3 coaching books I've ever read. So number 1 is John Wooden on leadership. Number 2 is Inside Out Coaching. Number 3 is now Finding the Winning Edge by Bill Walsh. But I will recommend Bill Walsh's other book, which is very, very good. Not as good as this one, in my opinion, for coaching. But The Score Takes Care of Itself. By Bill Walsh was a very, very good book. So it's exactly what the title is. So focus on the things you can control, the small wins, day by day processes and systems. And if you focus on that one game at a time, the championships, the wins, the games, they take care of themselves. So focus on the things you can control in your practice and your daily habits, and all of those things accumulate into wins, and you don't have to worry about what the scoreboard is because your processes are going to lead you to the promised land or to the championships. So The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh, and if you want to look for it, it's called Finding the Winning Edge by Bill Walsh, but yeah, I wasn't going to pay $600 for it.
No, I didn't think so. Wow.
No,
very good. Well, I'll borrow that after from you.
Yes, I will. I will give that to you. It's very good.
What a guy. So I've been reading. I just read this book actually, and it's a nice short one. You can read it in about a week. Force: The Biomechanics of Training by Dan Clether. So. I know, like many of you who probably went to school for strength conditioning or kinesiology or exercise science, I mean, a lot of people probably were like dreaded your biomechanics class. You're like, oh, it's the hardest class. There's math. It's boring. You sleep, because you probably didn't think about the application of what you were learning at the time because you're not actually working in the field. But what Dan Clether did a very good job making these concepts practical to what you actually do every day. And there's a lot of pictures, always good when there's pictures, and discussions of like practical application and things like that. So it's very good. And it's only like 150 pages. And so you can get through it pretty well. And it's a really good foundational book. I would say, like, if you are somebody who you look at that biomechanics textbook and you're like, oh, Jesus, I don't know what I need to read. What don't I need to read? Because there's usually a lot of stuff in there that can be hard to get through. This is a really good educational book for coaches that kind of focuses just on the fundamentals, the things that you need to know as a coach, and makes it more applicable to our practical application. So I read this in like a week. It was pretty easy to get through, and I wasn't zoning off and falling asleep. So I would definitely recommend it. Forced by Dan Clether.
All right. And Bill Walsh has been dead for 15 years. I just looked it up. 15 years. You were right. Oops. Well, I guess he's not going to autograph any of my books.
No, I guess not.
All right. Well,
but yeah,
coming up, we got Perform Better.
A lot of events.
The summits.
Yep. All the Perform Better
Orlando,
summits. We will not be at all of them.
No, we will not be. Orlando is this upcoming weekend. We will not be there. Chicago is in July. Yes. I will be at Chicago, and Providence is in August, and you will be at Providence, correct?
Yep. Last weekend in August, I'll be in Providence, correct. Yep.
Got it. Last weekend
Mike will just be in Providence as well. And we have a ton of CFSC workshops. We just had Toronto this past weekend. Vinny was up there teaching at Training Lane. Thank you to Cassie Day, All Day Fit. They did a great job organizing that. Nice. But next weekend, Steve Bigelow will be teaching a level 1, level 2 in Philadelphia at Drexel University. Then we have a level 2 in New York City, June 11th and 12th at Body Space with Kelvin Gary and his team. Then June 25th, we'll be in Cincinnati, Ohio at Block Sports Performance. Really cool little facility in Cincinnati. I've been there before. Then we're going to be in Woburn at MPSC July 8th, 9th, and 10th for a level 1, level 2 combo. That one's filled up pretty good. Then we're going to be our first event with EOS Fitness in Bountiful, Utah, July 30th. Then back in New York City for a level 1, July 31st at Momentum with Marco. And then August, Decatur, Georgia, August 20th for a level 1. Then New York again, September 25th. I just jumped all the way to September. Chicago, Illinois, August 26th, 27th, 28th. I got excited. I didn't want to skip over Wattage, though. They're great hosts in Chicago, so level 1, level 2 combo. So a lot of level 1, level 2 combos coming up. San Francisco, I would imagine that's going to be you teaching it, right? August 20th. September 25th, like I said, back in New York. Yep. September 25th is Stronger Strength Club in New York City, Kenny Santucci. And then Reading, Pennsylvania in October 7th, 8th, and 9th. For an event there at Alliance Fitness Center, Chesterfield, Missouri at Blue Ocean Fitness, October 22nd. And then Pursuit Performance in Wyckoff, New Jersey, November 5th and 6th for a level 2. So a lot of level 2s, a lot of combos, pretty much covering all parts of the United States over the next few months. So get on it. Don't say we didn't tell you. We have a bunch of them coming up. Unanimously, once we do an event, I bet I get a DM tonight being like, when are you guys coming to Toronto? I'm going to get that today. Although we always
get
yesterday.
One, the week after. Yeah.
So
when are you coming to Dubai? I was just in Dubai last week.
yeah, exactly. So hop on there, check those out. And so busy few months coming up, and we're heading right into summer here.
Yeah, here we go. June on Wednesday.
Yep, you betcha.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure, Kevin, and thanks everybody for listening.
As always, have a good night.